Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I always forget. I'm supposed to put my whole title up here because they want me to do that. So I'm Reverend Meg Biddle, and I serve as the national coordinator for Ministry Life at ABHMS, and I am here in the great state of Pennsylvania at the Leadership and Mission Building, which is in King of Prussia, not far from where the Holy Donut used to be. So today, my guest is Reverend Dr. Greg Mamula, who is the Transitional Executive Minister of Nebraska. Greg, thanks so much for being with me today and, coming on and listening to me jabber. I appreciate you giving your time to come and talk about your book.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here with you.
So for people who, for some reason, I don't know, maybe they're just not involved much in ABC Life, whatever, or maybe they just accidentally found us. So for somebody that doesn't know you, will you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I don't know how far back to go. My family roots are in Arkansas. My dad was military. I grew up going to military chapels kind of all my life. And so I kind of had this really wild ecumenical experience growing up. I first got introduced to American Baptists when I was in high school. My dad was doing some contract military work in Western Massachusetts. And so I went to an American Baptist church in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And somebody invited me to help with the soundboard of the church. And I paid attention to what was happening for the first time in my life and what was going on in church. And, I started to take Jesus more seriously then and became a follower. Went to college. My family roots, like I said, were in Arkansas. We moved back to Arkansas my senior year of high school, got kind of plugged in there. There are no American Baptist churches in the South, hardly at all. There's one good one in Bella Vista, Arkansas, but that was not where I lived. And so got kind of exposed to a lot of Southern Baptist life and went to a Southern Baptist college. And that's where I met my wife. We got married and felt kind of really uncomfortable with SBC stuff that was happening in the early 2000s. Very supportive of women in ministry, not real supportive of signing documents that dictate what you believe. Doesn't seem very Baptist to me. And so I went to graduate school. I went to Truett Seminary at Baylor down in Texas and had a really good experience there. I got exposed to the larger Baptist universe in the United States. So that was kind of a cool experience. And then after graduation, I became associate pastor of First Baptist Church in North Platte, Nebraska. And that's an American Baptist church. Many of you might know Tom Wiles. He was a senior pastor at that church. And so I got to work with Tom for about 5 years. And it was a very meaningful, life-shaping season for both me and my wife. Both my kids were born in North Platte, Nebraska. We have 2 kids. My daughter is now 14. She's a freshman in high school, which is crazy. And my son is going to be 12 in a couple of weeks in December, and he's in 6th grade. We are really into the arts. My wife paints. She does crafts. She does everything that requires an artistic ability. And I have none of that.
Neither do I.
Yeah,
I can knit, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm one of these, I don't know what you call it. Like, I'm really good at mimicking. I can watch something long enough, then I can sort of do it. And so when I was a kid, I was playing sports. I was really into baseball. And that's kind of my first love beyond the church is baseball. And I would watch pitchers and I would watch hitters and I would like mimic their moves and do stuff like that. And that's kind of how I developed as a player for a long time. But I would watch my wife knit and crochet both. And she would do it for hours, and I said, let me try that. And I would just pick it up and I would do a couple and I'd hand it back to her. And she gets so mad at me. She's like, it took me forever to learn. You did it on your first try.
I understand
why.
this, yes.
Yeah, it's maddening, and I don't know why I'm able to do things like that, but it is.
Wow.
So I have knitted, I have purled, I have dropped a stitch, so I know a little bit about that, but just on one strand. Never made anything in my life.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of us. My daughter's really into music, and my son is too right now. So when they're not doing art, they're doing music. Lego is a major foundation of our family dynamics. And we live in a neighborhood where we try to get to know everybody we live near. And what else? Oh, I started this role. I began as associate executive minister in 2012 for the American Baptist Churches in Nebraska. So I've been here 10 years on region staff. And then now with Robin moving on to Office of General Secretary, I'm serving as a transitional executive minister for our region.
See, this is what I love about doing this is hearing everybody's story. Like
Yeah.
I knew about North Platte, but I'd forgotten.
Sure.
Everybody loves Tom Wiles.
Everybody loves Tom Wiles. What's not to love?
Right, exactly. I know him from Nehemiah Leadership.
Okay.
And that, hey, I listened in church because I got to do the soundboard, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I think that having a purpose is essential for everybody,
Sure.
but especially for getting and keeping our youth engaged. But that's
that was a key time in my life. Honestly, I was a freshman, or let's see, my sophomore, junior year. I was there in Massachusetts, and I had always had this connection to God, like just because we were going to chapels. My mom was raised Southern Baptist and was very adamant we go to church. And when we were on military bases, we went to chapels. And when we were places where we could go to a Baptist church, she would just go to one, not knowing, honestly, there was a difference between American Baptist or Southern Baptist or Free Will Baptist or any of the other kinds,
Right.
She just went to the nearest Baptist church, and this one was an American Baptist church. And it was a crazy experience because Chris and Priscilla Smith were pastoring the church at the time. If anybody here knows them, hook me up to connect them, because I want to say thank you for changing my life. I kind of lost track of them over the years. And so they were pastoring this church so this would have been like 97, 98, somewhere around there. I think they went to Michigan after that. And I lost track of them after that. So, but the Sunday school class was doing, Philip Yancey did the Jesus I Never Knew.
Oh, yeah.
This was a high school Sunday school class, and they were reading this book together. And I saw two things happen. One, I connected to the church and paid attention to worship because I was doing the soundboard. And then I realized you can take your faith very, very seriously and think deeply about it, because we were doing that book. And so those were big moments for me. And that kind of put me on this path to ministry eventually. So yeah, that's kind of a weird part of that story.
No, I think it's an important part of the story, because it's like, as you're saying, like this was a really key time in your life. I think that there have been plenty of studies that show that, the church does a pretty okay job up until, about that 6th grade-ish mark.
Sure.
Kind of stuff. But for you to go, I had a purpose, and then I found out that there was so much more.
Yeah.
To, I think, is important for other people to hear, and hopefully somehow we can find those people who were so influential in your life and say the thank yous, because those are important.
Yeah. And to demand something of high school students. I think we spend so much energy with the activities and the easy entry points, which are key.
Right.
I did a lot of youth ministry myself, but certainly that challenge has to be part of it as well. It can't always just be easy entry point type activities and things. So having that challenging book to read as a high school student was what hooked me. It wasn't the games. It was the thinking deeply about the faith and who Jesus was.
You should write a book about that. No, seriously.
Put it on my to-do list.
So talking about books,
yeah,
we're actually supposed to talk about a book,
okay.
your book, your table life book, and so it was published in 2020, if I remember right. Yeah.
2021. Yeah.
2021. Okay.
Yeah.
So was this part of your DMen
Yes.
project? Is that because I
Yeah.
saw, thank you to your
Yeah.
cohort group. So
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Uh so why? I mean, what I mean, I know in our
Yeah.
DMen, because I'm at Central as
Sure.
well.
Right.
Um that there's the final project, but why table life? Why did
Yeah.
you need to write this?
So it was kind of a confluence of several different things happening in my life at the moment. Okay. So when we first took on this role as a region staff person, when my family and I relocated, I have been a church staff member since I was 19, like all through college, all through seminary, beyond seminary. That's the only adult job I've ever had. And so my wife and I, we got married in that situation. I was already pastoring churches. And so every church and, as a kid, your parents pick your church, right? And so as a staff member, you got kind of built-in family, and which is a beautiful blessing of being a pastor, is you kind of get the grace of connecting with the church in a way that not everybody gets that immediate welcome when they come visit a church. As friendly as our churches are and as open as we are, sometimes it is hard to break into those dynamics. And so, but pastors get a pass. And so when we came on region staff, we had the opportunity to kind of identify a church that my family wanted to worship in the city of Omaha. And we went to visit a lot of the ABC churches in the area. And my wife felt most comfortable at a particular church in Bellevue. And so we started going there, and we started making relationships with some of the younger adults within the church who had kids of a similar age or were going through similar life experiences. And we just kind of became friends with them, and we would go to their house and they would come to our house, and we would share these meals. And somewhere along the way, I just asked the question, like, why are you part of this church? Why this church? Did you grow up in this church? Did you choose this church? Are you here because you have a leadership role? Several of the people we were sharing these dinners with were worship leaders. They were in the band, either singing or playing an instrument. Some led Sunday school classes. Some just volunteered a lot. Like one guy was the drummer, but also did a lot of maintenance, like just fix stuff in the church. It's just a real friendly and helpful person in that way. So just kind of hearing like, why are you connected? And for some of them, it is the classic. I grew up in this church. These are my people. This is my family. My dad goes here. My mom goes here. My sister goes here. My kids go here, and there's some of that. And then there's some of just, I connect because I am participating in something. So we got to hear some of those stories. About that same time, American Baptist Churches USA, we were doing a lot of partnerships with Alan Roxburgh, and we were doing Joining God in the Neighborhood, and we were doing a lot of the listening groups and all these kind of things. And it's kind of when Dwelling in the Word became kind of foundational to how we gather as American Baptists when we meet. I mean, it's still a major impact on who we are. And I went to an event, and he had a co-speaker who told us a story about how he loved his backyard, but spent time in his front yard because that's where his neighbors were. And I was so mad at that guy by the end of that conversation because I also love my backyard. That's where my kids play. That's where our grill is. That's where our little fire pit was. That's where we played wiffle ball. And I didn't want to hang out in my front yard. I wanted to just have my suburban life where I came home and went inside and went in my backyard. And I had my job with my churches, but I didn't necessarily want to have to be friends with my neighbors. But I was just so convicted by that story, and that we went out to Walmart and we bought these really inexpensive plastic chairs, and we sat in our driveway a couple of days a week. And we just, as people walked by, would say, hello, this is us. What's the name of your dog? Our kids play at the park too. You want to let them hang out together. And my kids were itty bitty then. My daughter had just kindergarten. My son was toddling about, that kind of stuff. And this just kind of grew over time, where we thought, okay, now we have met our neighbors. What do we do with that? but we're still eating dinner with these other people. And the situation was where we had a context problem. We were worshiping in one neighborhood, but living in another. And we had to decide, do we leave the church context and try to find a more local congregation so that when we minister, we can point people to a church that's closer to this neighborhood that we're a part of as well? Or do we relocate our context to be closer to the church and these other people we're spending all this time with? And that was a really hard decision, actually. But ultimately, we decided to move out of our neighborhood to a neighborhood closer to the church where we were having dinner and doing these things with other people. And so we chose a home. Kind of a funny story. We were in worship on Palm Sunday, and our realtor calls us and says, "Hey, you need to leave right now because there's this house going on the market tomorrow, and it's going to sell if you don't put a bid on it right this minute." And I'm like, my wife looks at me, she says, "We got to go." And I said, "It's Palm Sunday." We're in church. And so it was in this like Sunday school hour. So we went to sign papers. We bought the house right then and went back to church by the time we were waving the branches in. So,
oh my gosh.
Close, right? I mean, this is the point. This was the whole point, is to be in this context.
Yeah.
And so it was just a beautiful moment, beautiful day. We bought the house and we took all these things we've been learning, all these relationships we've been building with these young adults, how we heard their story and all those kind of things. And we started, and all the stuff we had started with the other neighborhood, and we brought it to our new neighborhood. And it just became a lifestyle where we eat with people, we tell our story, we gather around scriptures, we pray with people, we listen to their stories, we respond to them and support people in their lives because we've heard who they are and where they are in the world and how they see and think about things. And that was all kind of a couple of years in when I started my demon work. And I wasn't 100% sure what to do. So I got my doctorate of ministry from Northern Seminary. Scott McKnight was kind of running this New Testament cohort on the Jewish context of the New Testament, which just sounds really good when you tell people. It sounds really cool. But it was amazing. It was some of the most formative. Again, I've had so many formative moments, but this was another formative season in my life where we got to look at the history of the first century and the Jewish writings of the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha and set the context for the New Testament. And it made Jesus make even more vibrant sense and more power. And one of the things that we learned is in that process was just how to build community. So as a region staff person, I'm often dealing with churches that are experiencing some level of tension or conflict. And at that point, it seemed like we had a couple of churches at the same time struggling with things. And I was thinking, all right, other than the reality that we're Midwestern passive aggressive, what are some of the reasons behind these conflicts? And I had a theory that if we had little conversations along the way, it would be like minor release valves. So then we got to this big thing, there wouldn't be a big fight. And so we had listening groups and we tried things. And so that was one of my theories. And I presented that as an option. I want to study community so that I can learn how to prevent the big fight. But then I realized, well, the New Testament wouldn't even be written if there weren't for all the conflicts.
Right.
So much of 1 Corinthians and Galatians and Ephesians. I mean, they're all like, all right, guys, chill out. Don't be like this. Be more like Jesus. And along the way, I discovered that one of the key terms for the church gathered in the New Testament was brothers and sisters. It appears some like 212 times in the New Testament as a description of the gathered body. And then I learned through research that was the most important social dynamic of the first century. Most important relationship were siblings. More important than marriage, more important than parents. Your sibling bond was what drove the Mediterranean culture.
That's very interesting.
And so when Paul pulls on that metaphor, when Jesus says, and Mark 3, his parents his mom and his siblings are outside, says, come outside and talk to me. He says, who's my mother and my brother and my sisters? It's those who are gathered here and do the will of God. They're pulling on an extremely important cultural norm to say that those who follow in the ways of Jesus are sibling relationships, which changes the dynamic of all the hierarchical things of their world, right? They've got classes, they've got ethnic boundaries, they've got religious boundaries, they've got political boundaries. And they're saying that when those boundaries are broken in the name of Jesus, neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, but all are in Christ, or all are one in Christ, or as Galatians puts it, we're all heirs of the Father, right? And so, well, how do you become brothers and sisters then? How do you break all those social dynamics and become siblings? They did it one meal at a time. And so that became the kind of theological foundation for why meals were so significant in Scripture and why they were still significant today, and why we were experiencing such positive reactions to just listening to people's stories around meals, because they're the catalyst that kind of become entry points into the kingdom so that we can do that work together. And so, yeah, that's kind of the birth story of where it came from. And then for the demon work, I had to do a formal project, and I worked with a local church, and we did some very structured versions of programmatic ways of doing table life in the hopes that it becomes a lifestyle for everyone. And that had such good results as a program that I introduced it to other churches in our region, started telling other people about it, and somebody said, you should write this down. I said, well, I've got a thesis. I mean, you could read that. And they're like, nobody's going to read that. It's very boring. And so I had a sabbatical in 2018, and I used it to write the first draft of what became Table Life. By the time I worked with a really, really good editor through Judson, and they crossed out sections and rewrite this, and this makes no sense, and this is too nerdy, this isn't common enough, all the things you have to do as a writer. And it was good work, and it was set to come out in the spring of 2020.
Okay.
It was it was done, edited, PDF version. I had seen the proof, I already knew what the cover looked like, and COVID happened the same March. And they're like, you know what? We should not publish a book about getting together right now. And that's a pretty smart move, probably. I'm not sure anybody would have looked at it. And then, so I sat on it for a little while. And then I said, what would it look like to add a chapter on doing table life through new media? Because we're all living on Zoom now. And so that chapter got added after the book was actually done, and kind of massaged that into it and added other parts to the beginning of end so that it would make sense. And then by the time it did come back out about a year later, in spring of 2021, that's how the version we have now came to be.
I appreciate books where, somebody had the wisdom that were in process or whatever, and somebody goes, we're just going to hold on this because everything is about to change, because you wonder, like, what would it be like if this author wrote the next chapter? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this is a great idea, but now that the world has changed, is there still a place for table life? I mean, yes, because I think when I think of the first thing that it pops in my life is Jesus and all the tables that meals that Jesus shared with people. I mean, Jesus on holy meals. It didn't matter who was at the table. That was a holy meal. But now that you're talking about, a pandemic and through a mask, and how do you break bread and engage 6 feet away, kind of thing. So I'm really glad that they did put the pause.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, to be honest, I mean, when they first told me, I was like pretty bummed out. Mm-hmm. But as we went into it and we knew more about what we were dealing with and how we were responding and how it was a great moment of division in the church and culture generally, to see it, okay, this made sense to wait.
Right.
And also to add, a chapter on technology was probably helpful. But it also made me rethink, like, okay, what are we doing when we gather? I had done all this thinking already, but now it's like, it's even more vital. We've had something removed. And so the love of connection and being in the presence of others was even more crucial going forward. But you had to do it safely and wisely and in the right time and in the right ways. And so that was all good pause. It was a good pause.
So is this book for anybody, or is it more geared toward clergy, churches? Who's your audience here?
Yeah, the primary audience then would be church people. I wrote from the perspective of strengthening existing congregations. That's really what it's for. But I believe that it can be a resource for if you want to do neighborhood ministries, like, how my family just kind of does stuff in our cul-de-sac so often is kind of foundational inside Table Life experience. I think it can be used in a work setting. You could do similar things over lunch with coworkers. You can do it with your fellow soccer parents or little league parents or school parents, or in our case, high school band stuff. And those are just areas where if you learn to listen well and learn to tell your story well, those are things you can use anywhere. That's universal. Being shaped by scripture is going to be foundational for us as followers of Jesus. So again, things that shape every aspect of your life. So these are written for the local church for the purpose of drawing them closer to God, to one another, and to their local church. And that's been a really cool thing to see as churches try this as a program, how it has in fact connected people to one another in some pretty neat ways. But it's also been a place for me to do a little bit of evangelism, because when we do this in our neighborhood, they know who we are because our story involves church and faith, and we do certain things and we don't do certain things because of our faith. That's maybe different from our neighbors. And when we leave on Sunday mornings to either go visit a church or go to our local church, then we may be the only people in our street who are driving a car that morning because they're all in bed and not going to church. But when things are happening in their lives, they talk to us and they know who I am, and they ask me to pray for them, or they share a burden. And I've become a little bit like a pastor on a hill to all these people because we live on top of a hill. I don't know if you know that, but it's like us and 12 houses I can see from my front porch, and I've been in every one of their houses, and they've been in every one of, and they've all been in my house, and we've all eaten together multiple times. And never a bait and switch situation. I've never invited somebody over to my house to have dinner and then I sprung Bible on them. But when I tell my story and they know who I am, sometimes they ask, I heard this once in church, or I heard this on the radio, or I see these things at protests with these Bible verses. What does that have anything to do with the Jesus that you worship? Because you seem to not act like that. Like, what's going on here? Tell me what this is about. And so we're going to have these kind of conversations, and it's rooted in deeper long-term relationships. And I find great value in those relationships as well.
And so those become holy meals themselves as well. I mean, I think that's beautiful. And it's a great picture of a community. I mean, of what I believe Jesus had in mind, with the way we should live in community is, okay, so we don't all think the same or approach it the same, but here I'm living as my authentic self. I'm not pretending to be somebody I'm not just because my neighbor's coming over. But yet they know that you are a safe space. And like you said, when they are the ones that are in need, they do come to you. I think it's a wonderful example.
And it works in reverse. I mean, I go to them with stuff like, hey, I got hung up somewhere. My kids are home alone. Can you go check on them real quick?
Right.
That kind of stuff. But, these neighborhood conversations, fence line conversations, driveway conversations, these are the stuff of life and community. And we moved into this neighborhood, like I said, about 8 years ago. And all these kids are within 7, 8 years of each other. And, they're like cousins or siblings even. They go to each other's houses, they have sleepovers, they, play games. They're outside all summer long together. And us as parents were out there, visiting with one another a few nights a week. And, we all have lives, we have jobs. It's not, I don't want to mislead anybody and think we're just some sort of a weird commune who has every meal together, but we're pretty intentional as a community to gather at least every so often. And we feel it, actually. It's kind of interesting. We kind of feel like it's been a long time since we got together, right? Let's do this. Let's have a big dinner, and we'll have multiple people over for stuff as simple as Little Caesars pizza, because they're $5 each and it's super cheap.
You guys have Little Caesars out there?
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. And or hot dogs or potluck. Everybody will bring something, it's not like we're having elaborate banquets,
right.
It's just life food as we live together, and kids running in and out and break stuff. And, it happens, it's life, but we're willing to do all that together. And it's just been this amazing experience for the last few years. Between my region work's always very, very rewarding, but my neighborhood is a space of great life-giving affirmation.
What a great story. I think it's a fantastic story, just to go, hey, I got really annoyed with this one guy who was talking about the neighbors, and and now, and the intention behind it all, and to go, we really need to make this decision. I think it's lovely. I think it's lovely. So if people want to go buy the book, right? Make sure I put that up there. We've got tablelife.org where you can buy the book. You can also buy it at Judson Press and Amazon. We'll be happy to deliver it to your porch. We also have your ABC Nebraska up, where you are currently the transitional executive minister, right? I got that right.
Yeah.
Nebraska. So you have a whole lot going on with the two kids, the book, the everything. I mean, but it's great, isn't it?
It's fun. So through this process, you kind of have to evaluate kind of your CV and your resume and stuff. And it's just, sometimes I get overwhelmed by all the opportunities I've been allowed to be a part of. I've had some amazing mentors. Tom and Robin have been huge impacts on my life. And that's given me lots of opportunities. I'm also a host of a podcast called Mission in 5, where we interview people and ask them, we ask what I say is we ask 5 simple questions to ministry practitioners to learn more about who they are and where they see God working in their community, right? That's our tagline, my podcast voice. And, we have all kinds of people. Normally it started out as a podcast for just interviewing people in Nebraska so that like everybody could learn who our pastors were. But then it became a thing where I expanded it, like anybody that has a relationship with Nebraska. So we've had ABHMS personnel on there. We've had IM personnel. Right now, my thing is all the IM people. I did like a whole thing with seminary professors and presidents for a while. Just anybody that has a relationship with ABC. If we have guest speakers coming in from outside of our Nebraska, for like a pastor's conference or something, we'll interview them. So I've had people like Todd Bolsinger or JD Briggs or, these kind of people. And it's been kind of cool,
Okay. So if they want to catch your podcast, where
it's called Mission in 5, and it's on all the podcast platforms. So Mission in then the number 5. We ask 5 questions, and it's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on iHeartRadio, it's hosted at Podbean, but it pushes it to all those other platforms.
Wow, you're like semi-famous. Look at that.
I mean, the stats behind the scenes would say otherwise.
Oh, okay.
But it is, it's out there for people to check out if they want. And right now we're doing IM personnel. So if you want to connect with some of the coolest people within ABC, just go check out some of these things. I talked to the Borquists. I talked to Mercy Gonzalez Barnes just yesterday. Sharon Coe's coming up. I mean, I've already interviewed her, but the episode's coming out. Debbie and Keith Myers, I think, is on this season. Melanie Begow, Christy Engel. I've got lots of people, and a lot of them is because we had relationships with them. We've had churches partner with them over the years, or they've been in the region recruiting. It's kind of Nebraska specific, but it's also generally good for ABC to just learn more about their global.
Oh yeah, which, like I told you earlier, is kind of
I used to joke when I was younger. I've always had kind of a higher voice, and when I was younger, it was way worse. And when I first started preaching, like, who's going to take this person seriously? I didn't have quite the preacher voice, but I would joke that I had the perfect face for radio and the perfect voice for writing books, and so I've done all of it actually. I decided I'm just going to try everything.
Well, I mean, I think you do just.
I don't have radio podcast, but I've written a book, and I like writing articles. I have ongoing writing projects that I do with Word and Way publication. It's a Midwest Baptist magazine, and I write for them off and on. I write articles for Christian Citizen about 6 times a year. So
your voice is out there in many, many ways. So then this brings us to that joy question, which is my favorite question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
You've got so many things.
Yeah.
Dad, and so out of all that you do, what brings you joy?
Yeah. I joke when people ask for my bios on stuff. And on my Table Life bio and my Twitter handle, it basically says the same thing, is that, I'm an avid baseball fan. I'm a hoodie sweatshirt advocate. I'm a tea snob. I play a lot of softball, and I love stories. And these are all things that bring me joy. I love being a dad. I love being a husband. I love being a neighbor. I like to write, but that combination is what brings me joy. But I think if I had to nail it down to one thing, is just all the friendships I have make all the difference, because I have all these friendships in different contexts, but I get to be the same me in all of them. When I'm playing softball, they call me Pastor Greg, and I'm playing in a city league, and people are chucking beers between innings, and, but it's same as Table Life, just extended, right? We're just being community to these people. And that's what I love, is all my friends. So I have softball friends, I have church friends, I have great colleagues, I have good neighbors, and it's these relationships that give me life.
I think that's a great answer. I think it's a great answer. I mean, I'm allowed to say that, it's my show, but I really do. I think it's a great answer. And yeah, I've got a commute, so I'll pick up the podcast. I'm always up for a good listen. So that's great. I just wanted to say thank you again for your time, for coming and sharing your story and your book. And so for people who haven't read it, don't own it, go out, buy it, please.
Hey, I found something new actually the other day. Somebody was asking me about it. I looked at the Amazon page, and I generally don't do that, but I tried it, and there's used ones now. And I thought, hey, you've made it when somebody's selling a used version of your book. I mean, what more could you be grateful for?
Wow. So, Greg, that's fantastic.
I keep waiting to go into one. I go to a lot of used bookstores in our town to just pick up things kind of on the cheap, and I haven't found one in a used bookstore yet, but someday that's the goal.
Yeah, no, but I get it. That's really cool. That is really cool. You're like,
yeah. And it's also in e-reader format. So if you're like an e-reader person, you like Kindles or whatever, Judson did a good job putting it on that format as well. So
I'm not. I like to write in books.
Yeah. I much prefer print versions of everything. Hence the big wall of books here.
I mean, occupational hazard, right?
Yeah.
So, well, again, thank you,
Thank you.
Reverend Dr. Greg Mamula, for your time and again for sharing your story and your book. And for everybody watching, thank you for joining us. We are here on Facebook, on YouTube, all those other wonderful places you can find us on Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And, then you can just stream them, share them with friends, whatever.
Yeah.
But we're glad for people to come and watch us and, reach out and say hello and get a hold of Greg. I'm sure he'll love it.
Let's be friends.
Yes,
my favorite thing.
Right. So again, thank you everybody for watching.